In today's tutorial, you will learn how I made this natural Afro hairstyle with a headband. If you'd like to learn more about this doll and this video series, you can click on this link up here. All the tools and supplies mentioned in this video will be linked down below in the description box. So, let's get started. For today's tutorial, you will need a doll who needs some hair, yarn of your choice. Today I'll be using Premier Basics in the colorway Rose, a crochet hook. I'll be using one of my favorite hooks, which is Clover Amour's 3.75mm F hook, a pair of scissors, and some embroidery or darning needles. I'll be using Clover darning needles. When choosing a needle, I'm looking for a large eye and a blunt tip. I love to work with both straight and bent tip needles, but these are some of my favorites. Stitch markers are optional but helpful for beginners. For this doll's hair, I start off with a basic hair wig cap. I start in the center and continue working in rounds. Today, I'll explain how to make a wig cap fit your individual doll's head. I will also explain how to make these loops to attach the individual hair strands. That's what we'll be covering today. In typical Amigurumi fashion, I'll be starting off with a magic circle. If you need to learn how to make one, there are many great tutorials here on YouTube that can help you with that. If you don't like the magic circle, feel free to do the alternative chain 2 method of starting a circle. For round 1, work 6 single crochets into the magic circle. I use the yarn under technique for my single crochets, so don't be alarmed if my single crochet doesn't look like yours. You should have 6 stitches at the end of round 1. If you're a beginner, at the end of each round, get into the habit of counting the stitches to ensure you have the correct amount before proceeding. I'm using a double ring magic circle, so you'll see me tightening 2 separate rings to close the circle. I'm also twisting the 2 ends to try and bring them closer together and close up the gap. This helps to ensure that my stitches are as even as possible when joining the 2 ends in a spiral. In today's tutorial, we will be working in a spiral as opposed to joined rounds. This is the first stitch of the round, and it's where I will be continuing in a spiral. Each stitch is made up of 2 loops. This is the back loop, and this is the front loop. I will be working in the back loops only from here on out. This leaves the front loops open, allowing us to attach each of the individual hair strands later on. Now is a good time to use a stitch marker if you want to track the rounds. I prefer to mark the last stitch of my rounds, but feel free to mark the first stitch if you prefer. The most important thing to remember is to be consistent no matter what your preference. For round 2, work 6 single crochet increases, all in the back loops only. I'm working over my tail in the next few stitches in order to secure it. I'll meet you at the end of round 2. You should have 12 stitches at the end of round 2. For round 3, the pattern repeat is 1 single crochet followed by an increase, all in the back loops only. Repeat this pattern 6 times. See you at the end of round 3. You should have 18 stitches at the end of round 3. For round 4, the pattern repeat is 1 single crochet, 1 increase, 1 single crochet, all in the back loops only. Repeat this pattern 6 times. See you at the end of round 4. You should have 24 stitches at the end of round 4. Let's stop for a moment. Notice all the freestanding loops? Remember in the beginning when I said that each stitch is made up of 2 loops? These are the front loops that I left unstitched while working in the back loops only. This is what I will be using to attach the hair strands to. Now let's continue. For round 5, the pattern repeat is 3 single crochet followed by an increase, all in the back loops only. Repeat this pattern 6 times. See you at the end of round 5. You should have 30 stitches at the end of round 5. For round 6, the pattern repeat is 2 single crochet, 1 increase, 2 single crochet, all in the back loops only. Repeat this pattern 6 times. See you at the end of round 6. You should have 36 stitches at the end of round 6. I'm going to stop here and audition the wig cap on my doll's head for sizing. What I'm looking for is that the circle is at the same circumference as my doll's head. Right now, my wig cap is smaller, so I'll need to keep increasing. You'll want to do the same auditioning process for your doll's head until it's the correct size. For round 7, the pattern repeat is 5 single crochet followed by an increase, all in the back loops only. Repeat this pattern 6 times. See you at the end of round 7. You should have 42 stitches at the end of round 7. Notice that I count in 2s. I find that it's much quicker when counting stitches. I'm auditioning the wig cap on my doll's head once more for sizing. Again, I'm looking to see if the circle is the same circumference as my doll's head. Right now, my hair wig cap is still too small. I'm going to continue this process of auditioning and increasing until my hair wig cap is the right size for my doll. For round 8, the pattern repeat is 3 single crochet, 1 increase, 3 single crochet, all in the back loops only. Repeat this pattern 6 times. See you at the end of round 8. you should have 48 stitches at the end of round 8. I'm auditioning the wig cap again, and this time it looks like it's the correct size. The circle is the same circumference as the doll's head, so I'm going to stop increasing. On occasion, in order to make the circle the exact circumference of my doll's head, I've made partial round increases. For example, if I were to continue increasing where the pattern repeat is 7 single crochet followed by an increase, I would repeat that pattern as many times as I need, not necessarily a total of 6 times. Otherwise, that would be a full round of increases. This method would work as long as there are no special edging to the wig cap. Otherwise, you may need to adjust the total number of stitches accordingly. Keep increasing until your circle matches the circumference of your doll's head. This is necessary before continuing on to the next step. For the rest of the wig cap, I'll be working 1 single crochet into each stitch. This means no increases and no decreases, making it a total of 48 stitches at the end of each round. Your total number of stitches may vary from mine depending on how many rounds of increases you did for the wig cap. Again, I will be auditioning the hair wig cap intermittently on the doll's head to determine when to stop. Ideally, you want to have the doll's face finished by this step. This will help to figure out placement and sizing of the wig cap. At this point, I've got 15 rows total, and it seems to fit the doll's head nicely. Now I can proceed with the hair strands. But first, I'll be finishing off my wig cap with a slip stitch under both loops. This helps to smooth the end finish. On occasion, I've even done multiple slip stitches to help with the transition. Just play with it to see what looks best for your doll. I used to leave a long tail for sewing the wig cap on. However, nowadays I prefer to use a matching embroidery floss instead. So, I'll be cutting a short tail, finishing it off, and weaving in the end. If you prefer to use yarn, feel free to leave a long tail for sewing. This is where the last stitch is coming from. You can tell by tugging on the tail gently. This is the first stitch, and this is the second stitch from the last. I skip the first stitch and go into the second stitch from the back, and back into the top of the stitch from where I came. Then I'll anchor it down by going through a couple of other stitches below it. I flip it to the front side of the wig to make sure that I cannot see my needle. If I see my needle poking through, that means that I'll be able to see the yarn being woven through to the front side of the fabric, which is what I try to avoid. I pull the yarn until the stitch is the same size as the rest. I've essentially made a false stitch above an existing one. You can tell by the two horizontal bars. The bottom bar is the original stitch, and the top bar is the false stitch that I just created when finishing off. Now I can weave in my end. I like to zigzag my stitches in at least 3 directions to lock it into place. I'm checking to make sure that I'm weaving the end only through the back side of the fabric. I'm pulling the yarn just enough to remove any slack, but not too much where I end up tightening the false stitch that I just made. Remember, I made the false stitch just the right size to blend in with the rest. I'm not being too careful about going under stitches. In fact, I prefer to split the stitch and even weave through the yarn itself. I feel that it helps to lock in the tail. When I'm zigzagging and pulling on the tail, I'm being careful not to pull too tightly where I end up distorting the stitches at the ends when changing directions. Be sure to place the seam on the back side of the doll's head where it will be less visible. When doing a final fitting for size and for attaching, I place the wig cap on, pin it in the center to keep its place, and then smooth the rest of the cap down with my fingers, working from the center out. This will remove any slack and ensure that the cap fits nice and snug on the doll's head. Now that I'm done with the base of the wig cap, I can continue on to the hair strands. First, I need to find the centermost front loop to which I attach the yarn. It's okay if you can't find the correct one. Just do your best to find the closest to the center. That way, you will avoid any visible gaps in the hair. When inserting the hook, I'm mindful that I'll be working away from the center in a spiral fashion from right to left. I tend to crochet with a tight tension, so I find that I sometimes need a little help to get my crochet hook into the stitch. If you encounter the same issue, use a darning needle to help stretch it out a bit first. Once the hook is in the first stitch, make a loop with the yarn and pull it through. Be sure to leave a generous starting tail to weave in later. Start with a chain of 17. You can make the hair strands however long or short you want. I just find that 17 chains works well for me and my doll. You can certainly play with the number of stitches that works best for you. As I'm chaining, I'm adjusting the placement of my left fingers to maintain proper tension and consistent stitch sizes. This is the first chain, and this is the second chain from the hook. I'll be working into the second chain from the hook. I work one single crochet into each chain. I should have a total of 16 stitches at the end. In order to anchor the hair strand down, I need to find the next stitch. This is the stitch where the hair strand is worked from. You can wiggle the hair strand back and forth to help you identify it. And this is the next stitch. This is where I will anchor the hair strand with a slip stitch. Be sure to pull the tail so that the slip stitch is the correct tension and size. The pattern repeat is chain 17, 16 single crochet, slip stitch. Repeat this pattern for as many times as you need hair strands. Be careful when identifying the next stitch to slip stitch into. You can use a wiggle test to identify the current stitch. At first, the hair strands may look inconsistent, but you can help them along by twisting them in the same direction. This will help them to be consistent and give you that nice afro puff that I'm after. Continue twisting the hair strands as you progress throughout the wig cap. Remember not to crochet all the way to the edge of the cap. We'll need some space for the headband to lay flat. This is how the wig cap looks so far with a few rows done. And this is how it looks with a few more done. It's not quite full yet, so I'll need to keep going. So, while making this tutorial, the worst thing happened, and I ran out of yarn. I did say that I'd share my successes and failures with you, so here it is. This is how far I've gotten. I'm gonna talk you through how I approached this. Because I ran out of hair strands, the flat portion of the wig cap is currently visible. Even if I were to try and push the hair strands downward, it's still not enough coverage, which is not ideal. So what I'm thinking is removing some of this flat portion of the wig cap. And I'm thinking about 3 rows or so. In my last video where I first introduced this video series, I mentioned that I'm not adding hair strands all the way to the edge. And the reason why is so that the headband can lay flat on the doll's head. Otherwise, there would be too much bulk. So what I'm after is that the headband is sitting just below where the hair strands stop, but with a little bit of wig cap peeking through the bottom of the headband's top knot to represent the hairline on the forehead. Another reason is so that the hair looks like it's being pulled upwards from the hairline into the afro puff. If you wanted, you could just stop crocheting the wig where the hair strands stop. I just continued mine to establish a lower hairline. If the headband covers all the way up to the hair strands in the back, it shouldn't matter that much. It's the front part that makes more of a difference in appearance. I may need to play with the hair strands a bit to help cover things up, but this is basically what I'm trying to achieve. Now back to this doll. Since I ran out of yarn while making the hair strands, I'll be frogging back some of the wig cap in order to recover some of the yarn to use as hair strands instead. This is the tail from the beginning when I first attached the yarn to the wig cap. I need to pull it through to the inside. You can do it either with a crochet hook or a darning needle. I'm using a crochet hook in this instance. Once on the inside, I just find the nearest tail and tie the 2 ends together. Then I would weave the 2 ends separately in opposite directions. This precariously short tail is from the last hair strand. I don't want it to pull through to the right side of the fabric undetected. Otherwise, it would leave the hair vulnerable to unraveling. Once I start up my hair strands again, I can pull the new tail through to the inside and tie the 2 ends together. Here's my seam where I finished off. You can easily see where I weaved in the tail end. It should be easy for me to remove and frog back. So, I'd better get to it. I can tell exactly where my false stitch is by looking for the 2 horizontal bars that are stacked on one another. I also know to pull on the front top stitch because I always go through the back side towards the front, which is the closest to the sewing tail. But if you go in the opposite direction, you would pull on the back loop instead. I'm pretty consistent about that, so I always know to pull from the front. So here I go. Now I can start frogging. I'm not looking to be exact as far as where to stop, I'm just eyeballing it. I'm going to snip it off right here and weave in the end. So that's done. Now I can continue on stitching the rest of my hair strands using my recovered yarn. With the modification of removing some of the rows from the wig cap, I was able to add enough hair strands to make it work. And this is how she turned out. I did not sew the cap on, I just have it pinned for now because this doll is meant to have a different hairstyle in this video series. I just needed a stand-in mannequin for this tutorial. I'm happy with the way that it came out. I can pull some of the hair strands downwards to help cover things up. And she looks great from all angles. The tools and supplies you'll need for the headband are a doll with the hair finished and attached, a piece of fabric that complements the doll's skin tone and clothing, coordinating sewing thread, a measuring tape, sewing pins or clips, fabric cutting mat, fabric ruler, rotary cutter. This is my newest favorite rotary cutter, which is ergonomic. Or, if you prefer, a fabric marker of your choice and a pair of fabric scissors. And lastly, the sewing machine or sewing needle if you're sewing by hand. To get started with the headband, I'll need to take a rough measurement of the doll's head for proper fitting. I'll need the length, which I'll measure by going all the way to the bottom back of the head and to the top front of the hair where the strands stop. My doll's measurement is at 12 inches. Then I'll need the height, which I'll measure from the bottom back of the head straight up to where the hair strands stop. My doll's measurement is at 3 inches. Once I have my measurements, I'll need to make some adjustments. First, I need to add about 5.5 inches to the length for the tie. This makes my measurements 17.5 inches long by 3 inches high. This is how my tie turned out and I'm pretty happy with it. So I'll stick with 5.5 inches, but feel free to make yours longer if you prefer. Then I'll need to double the height so I can fold the fabric in half because the headband is double-sided. This now makes my measurements 17.5 inches long by 6 inches high. And lastly, I'll need to add a half an inch to both the length and the height for the seam allowance, making my final measurements 18 inches long by 6.5 inches high. Now I'm ready to cut the fabric to size. I'm using my rotary cutter today, but feel free to use a fabric marker and scissors to measure and cut. Now I'm gonna fold it in half lengthwise and pin it with some sewing clips, right sides together. When I sew it closed, I'll need to leave about a 3-inch opening for turning right sides out, being sure to do a back stitch on both sides so that it can withstand the tugging from the turning process. Sew around the open perimeter with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remember to do a back stitch when starting and stopping, especially where you create the opening. Now I'm gonna clip the corners, and this helps to reduce the bulk, making them sharper corners. Now I'm ready to turn it right sides out. I'll use something pointy but dull, like a chopstick, to help poke my corners out. Before sewing it closed, I'm going to wrap it around my doll's head to check for fitting. That way I can make any adjustments if necessary. Now that I know it fits, I can sew the opening shut. And that's the headband. I've talked about how to fit your hair wig cap properly on your doll's head. This comes in handy if you find that your wig cap doesn't fit when following a pattern, or when you're wanting to try a different yarn from what the pattern designer uses. Or maybe you're designing a pattern of your own. Knowing how to make a wig cap fit perfectly is a great addition to your amigurumi skill set. One restriction, however, is that this technique will only work for heads that are spherical in shape, not for those that have special shaping. Congratulations on making it this far. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section and I will try my best to answer them. Happy hairstyling! I hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a like and share it with your yarny friends so we can convince them to make amigurumis with us. If you haven't seen the video where I talk about this doll, check it out by clicking on this link. I hope to see you in the next amigurumi hairstyle video. Thanks for watching. Bye!